kind introduction. I realized you were so busy. Maybe I did. So we just would like to start by saying thank you to Amanda, Lucy, Rachel, and Jerry, and others for helping to sort of accommodate our visit and everything that led up to it. Our talk, our workshop that will be later this afternoon, as well as the web project that we did for the digital programs.
We wanted to start by just, when we were preparing for this talk, we were discussing what it means to make something. We wanted to start this morning by posing the question, why do a talk and workshop about digital practices and an assembly specifically designated to the handmade?
And so, thinking through this question over the last couple of months, we found that within our respective art practices, it is no longer useful for us to make the hard distinction between digital and traditional labor. We've observed that digital research and digital tools play an increasingly important role in the way we produce physical objects. Physical objects people, artists, makers produce, and the tools they use to do so are part of material culture, which can be defined as
a term used to describe the objects produced by human beings, including buildings, structures, monuments, tools, weapons, utensils, furniture, art, and indeed any physical item created by a society. As such, material culture is the main source of information about the past from which archaeologists can make inferences. This list could also include photo and editing software, drawing tablets, iPhone apps, modeling software, animation programs, and computer numerically controlled or CNC machines, such as laser cutters and 3D printers.
And so thinking through these things and the relationships between digital and physical tools and spaces, we've also found ourselves questioning what is making now, and concluding that, of course, as many people have, it must include digital production. As contemporary societies become more reliant on digital tools, the ways makers produce material culture is changing, and the definition of material culture is expanding to include them. As such, the lines become blurred regarding how artists and their practices are defined.
In her essay, Hidden Practices, Artists, Materials, Tools, and Working Spaces in the Digital Domain, Anne-Sophie Lemon suggests that through new media, virtual and physical spaces intersect each other simultaneously, continuously creating new spaces, all of which coexist in a non-hierarchical structure. Digital and analog spaces become equal in contemporary art.
And in this essay, she argues that work often takes place in what she calls an oscillating creative space between the traditional studio and programs which simulate the studio, such as Adobe Photoshop and Paint. And we spent some time thinking about the ways that, to save, you press on a floppy disk icon, and in Photoshop you might use a paintbrush icon. So we were sort of thinking about that sort of visual representational language that we use within our digital practices. And creative spaces have become more difficult to mark out and often exist at the intersection of physical space and the machine world, such as human-computer interfaces like hands touching a keyboard, so the way that we're activating software and programs using our bodies is sort of still something that's happening in physical space. And we've also been thinking through these relationships within our individual practices and the way we each undertake labor and utilize tools. And so now we're going to sort of start and begin to the meat of the presentation by looking at some of our individual works and talking through the ways that we make them. Yeah, we should swap. It's going to become a watch show by the end. So the first example that we're going to talk about is a work of mine called Siri Juliana Hilaro. Sorry if anyone speaks Finnish. This is a Finnish name that I have trouble pronouncing. And in this work, I moved between digital and physical processes to make a work that's based on a found object, which you can see here. And it's the passport of a woman named Siri. And this passport illustrates her process of immigration in 1952. And so it's filled with the markings that trace her immigration to Canada from Finland, and she comes into Canada through Pier 21. And so the final work ends up looking like this. This is documentation of the work at the Art Gallery of Mississauga in Mississauga. And you can see this documents each page in the passport, starting from the front cover and ending at the back cover. This frame right here actually contains the object itself, but which is sort of the next page in the sequence. So the physical object is integrated amongst the photographs in a way that kind of is camouflage, I suppose. And I'm interested in the way that sort of photograph and the object kind of tension in that moment as we move through the sequence. You can see in the center that there are two enlarged pages, and these are actually, let's get to here, the same page. Sorry, this mouse or scroll moves the opposite way of mine, so that's why I'm like up and down. So this is actually the same page repeated, and this GIF is kind of an illustration that I used to talk about the content of those two sort of enlarged photographs. So in the passport, the original object that I found, this page, of course, because it's all stamps and text from Halifax, are in English and French. But I was thinking about the way that Siri is Finnish and was probably thinking through all of these very visual processes and moments by translating everything into her native tongue. And so what I did was actually go through this pretty labor-intensive process of collage to generate an image that looked real but wasn't. And what I did was actually work with two translators. So I'll jump back up. So I worked with two translators by providing them sort of a map to the document. I did some quick scans and numbered every element, every stamp, signature, piece of text. I then sent that to them, and they returned this document, which acted as an index to all the content. So because I speak English, a tiny bit of French, I could read those elements of the object, but I couldn't read any of the text that was in Finnish or Swedish. So her passport took her from Finland into Stockholm, into London, Great Britain, and then into Canada. So she was sort of continually, I feel, have been navigating this process of moving through languages and spaces at the same time. So I sort of received this map, which is a Word document, which I really used as a tool to understand the object and the sort of history that it represents better. I then took the translations and did a bunch of cutting and pasting and blending and clone stamping and history tooling to generate this kind of forgery. And if I zoom in, you can see it here. This is the photograph of the original object left as is, and this here is my forgery. So everything that's in English is actually now in Finnish. So I was kind of sort of imagining this as a visualization of sort of her thought process and what would go on as she kind of developed an understanding of all these markings. Okay. So, hand it over to Ella. It's going to be
Yeah.
work.
So this is a work, I'm actually just going to skip down and then go back up. So this is a work called 50 Shades of Grey, and this book is 50 Shades of Grey. I found it for $1 in a bookstore, or a pound, I guess, in a bookstore in London. I read, of course, the physical copy of the book, and then started to do research on the book itself and also kind of the phenomenon of 50 Shades of Grey. It was just before its release in Germany, which I think was a little bit money to the release in North America. And I was just interested in the kind of cultural conversation that was happening around 50 Shades of Grey, specifically kind of the publishing. It was originally self-published as fan fiction, so kind of what it means to kind of self-publish something, and then it was a major hit that you couldn't find anyone to publish it, and then it was self-published, so kind of what that means in terms of self-publishing books. But I was also very interested in the dialogue around kind of the increase in sales at sex shops because of 50 Shades of Grey, and on the other side of that, there were people kind of really upset about the repetition in the language and how simply it was written, and kind of the stereotypes that it was kind of perpetuating at the same time, being compared, for instance, to books like Lady Chatterley's Lover, which some people were kind of compared them in terms of what they did culturally, and other people were very upset about this comparison because Lady Chatterley's Lover is such a well-written book and she was good. So all of this kind of stuff that was happening, all of this debate that was happening online around 50 Shades of Grey. So what I did is I relied on the internet and kind of these conversations almost completely, and kind of researched kind of the commonly used words that were the 50 most commonly used words that were used in 50 Shades of Grey. I also did this, I think I did like an online quiz where I had to decide which words I thought were the most 50 commonly used words, and then it told me after which words they were. And I made them into a chart. Sorry. Scrolling trouble too. So this is the chart that I made of the 50 most commonly used words, and then I went through the book and marked all of the times that they were used in the book with corresponding colors to the chart. So you could, if you looked at one of the words, which I think they're pretty small, but for instance, like more is one of them. Like I want more, I want more, I want more is kind of one of the things that was repeated throughout the book. And you could find, given the bookmarks, all of the times that it said more in 50 Shades of Grey. And then I would have highlighted them in the book. Like goddess was another one. Inner goddess was used a lot. So I would have highlighted them in the book so you could go through it and kind of look at that. I was also very interested, of course, because of the cultural conversation. I had it on a pedestal and was very interested in elevating 50 Shades of Grey to like art object status within a gallery. Yeah.
Okay. So the way that we were sort of connecting these projects as we thought through the way we're making things using the internet and then generating objects that end up in a gallery was kind of through this process of searching for references and information online. And we feel like these collections of images and resources can reveal associative patterns and reflect our own reactions to content and evidence our trains of thought, so they become kind of pivotal acts of making. And in his book, Wasting Time on the Internet, Kenneth Goldsmith suggests that our browser history could be seen as a scrapbook, a textual and visual travelogue.
And a travelogue can be defined as a movie, book, or illustrated lecture about the places visited and experiences encountered by a traveler. We are arguing here that the images and information we collect, as well as the trajectory we follow to get there, is capable of revealing the important thought processes at stake when producing art. We found that there's a performative element to the way we travel or seek things out online. In the essay Lost Not Found, the circulation of images in digital visual culture, Marissa Olson suggests that the work of pro surfers, and she's using pro surfers to talk about post-internet art and people who professionally surf the internet in that context, transcends the art of found photography because this process also acts as a performance. The appropriated images go beyond simple referencing by lifting them out of their context and infusing them with new meaning in their new context. And I wanted to show a work called the Plattenbau Pop Culture Archive as an example kind of the more performative elements of the way that I would search online or use searching in my practice. So I originally did this performance, durational performance lecture, I guess you'd call it, as part of a residency in Weimar, Germany called Fabulous Jakobsplan. And this is Jakobsplan, and Jakobsplan is the only building of this kind, which is a Plattenbau, which is a very specific German building. It's made out of platen, it's made out of these very these concrete plates and kind of built in this like block-like structure. And Weimar is a place with a lot of, it was like the writing place of Goethe and the writing place of Schiller. It has this, it's a very beautiful town and has a lot of tourism. And this building, which houses a lot of international students, is kind of considered an eyesore. So what they did is they had a residency, they built in a residency for an art festival in Weimar called Fabulous Jakobsplan, where they were celebrating the Jakobsplan building and all it represents. And for this, they invited artists to come and live in the Plattenbau, and between like 4 and 8 every day, we would get like visitors that came through, and we would showcase our work as residents. So that's me in my room / art studio in the Plattenbau doing this project. So what I did for it, my studio at the time in Berlin was in a place called Marzahn, and Marzahn is a place where I think has the most amount of Plattenbaus, or these social housing structures in all of Europe. And I have a lot of fun. So the thing, oh wait, this is Berlin. This one more. I need to go to Marzahn. Usually, when I bring this little guy to anywhere inside Marzahn, I will be facing a Plattenbau, and I like to kind of try my luck and see how it works. So because my studio is in Berlin, in Marzahn, on the bottom of the Plattenbau, I was talking about, I wanted to develop a pop culture archive. So I was looking at all of the instances that the Plattenbau was used in any kind of pop cultural setting, whether it be music videos, I looked at like fashion blogs, I looked at video games, I looked at all of the things that I could kind of find online. And during this time, what I was doing is I was collecting, printing, putting up, discussing, and hopefully getting new resources to add to this kind of ongoing pop culture archive. And that, for example, is an image of all the screenshots of all the videos that I would have taken during that time. And I'm just going to show you a small video. So this video I showed after the fact and exhibited it in the bottom of the Plattenbau in Marzahn. So the other intention of this work was that I would do it and kind of do this kind of performance lecture where I was searching for images online, kind of durational thing during that time, and then I would take that back to Marzahn and exhibit my findings. Marzahn, we had a studio, and also there was a gallery attached to our studio, and the main attendees of the gallery were the residents of the Plattenbau. So I'll just show a bit of it.
Hallo, meine Freunde der
So I should say it's in German, so hopefully the images are.
Sieben Stück. Nehmen wir mal weg.
Manchmal denke ich, wenn du das Wort nimmst.
Hier sind noch ein paar Zuschauer.
Über 25 Jahre, genau gegenüber. Wir ziehen dich aus.
Was ist hier alles? Das ist der Vogel.
Maybe I'll stop there. It's not a long video, but I'll stop right there. So I did it by section. So the first section was the video games, and the second section was movies, and there's also a fashion section. And that was kind of one of the finished products. I've also done a website of it. It's not, and would have published it for a certain amount of time, and have shown it kind of differently depending on the context. And of course, like as new things emerge, I'd also try and add them. I think a year after I did this, Gucci did a fashion shoot outside of the Plattenbau, had this like big, and I was very happy about that. Yeah, great.
Okay, so I'm going to jump into a work of mine that also kind of generates a certain type of archive by using searching and keywords and looking for a particular subject online. So given that, I'm going to show a very physical object. So in 2012, I found this envelope at the old Book and Paper Show, which is kind of like an annual or biannual flea market in Toronto. That's sort of an ephemera sale. So I went and I wasn't looking for anything particular, just sort of seeing if anything could catch my eye. My work basically always starts with some kind of found object. It's usually a document or a photograph. And this object happened to catch my eye as I was sort of flipping through a box of, like envelopes and papers, kind of like mounted on boards in plastic, and I was just sort of flipping through quickly. And I noticed it because of this blue ink. And it's been mailed to Keswick, Ontario, which is the small town that I grew up in. And it's the kind of place that's, it's just over an hour outside of Toronto, but people who live and grew up in Toronto don't actually know what I'm talking about when I mention it. So it's like just small enough to be under the radar, even though it's not exactly a very remote place. So I thought it was kind of funny for me to find a reference to it when I don't think I ever really have before. And so I looked more closely at the object and noticed something even more strange, which is that if you look at the postmark here, it was actually mailed from Pole Station, Antarctica. And I sort of thought to myself, is there a post office in Antarctica? I sort of had never dedicated much thought to what was on the continent, besides penguins and snow and ice. So given that it had this kind of strange and really geographically lengthy trajectory, I bought it, I think, for $11, which felt kind of expensive at the time, but it was too kind of strange a coincidence to pass up. So I brought it home and started doing some research, just basic research on what is in Antarctica. Is there a post office in Antarctica? Just sort of Googling funny keywords to sort of get some basic information. And as I was doing that, I opened up eBay, which is a place online that I often find found materials to make my work. I find a lot of photographs there that I end up using. And so I opened it up because it's kind of become this go-to place for me that sort of acts as not only a spot where I can purchase materials for my work, but this kind of unlikely image bank where I can learn about types of objects or sort of certain moments in history through the things that ephemera collectors sort of are posting for sale. So in that moment, something even more strange happened, which was that I found another envelope that was mailed at exactly the same time on the same day. And I kind of had this spark moment where I said, this object and this object were once in the same place. They went away. One went to Canada, the other went to New Jersey. And now I kind of have this opportunity or capacity to put them back together when, mail is never, it's always just supposed to go to an intended sender and then it doesn't really have any kind of formal expectation beyond that. So I was really excited by this kind of moment of affect I was having around the possibility of bringing two objects that had been separated for 60 years back together. And so I kept searching and determined to make a project that is a collection of these objects, which I display in a gallery as physical objects, and I'm also building a website so I can kind of have people view it in different ways. So at this point, I'm sort of determined to just keep going until I can't find anymore. So I'm really interested in the notion that I could potentially reconstitute this batch of mail, or at least a huge sample of it, based on what happened to not get thrown out after someone opened their letter. And the reason that I can do this, and have now found over 90 envelopes from this batch of mail, is because of the strangeness of the location of their mailing. So I think people would feel a little bit more precious about this envelope that someone had mailed to them from Antarctica, which is a space that not very many people can actually access. So this is just an example of 3 of those envelopes. You can see they all say Pole Station, Antarctica, December 15th, 8 a.m., 1956. So there's this repetition of a particular moment in time. And I have a few examples here. And this one's pretty good. So most of them are kind of like plain and regular, and there's interesting instances of the way people arrange addresses and stamps. But there are a few that have like special calligraphy. This is the only one I think I had to actually have a bidding war over on eBay. Most of them just are they're like $1 and no one cares. And I'm like, I need it so badly. There's no competition. I'm checking back, but it's just me. This one, however, was it's extra charming, so I had to have a little battle for it, but I won. Yeah, so I'm continuously going back to eBay. This is a screenshot of eBay last week when we were preparing our presentation notes. I just clicked through to eBay and happened to find 2 envelopes as we were working and bid on them then. And they're now being shipped to me, which is very exciting. But really, I think eBay becomes this special place where if I search Pole Station Antarctica, I get these varied search results. And so everything from like contemporary and historical artifacts of research stations in Antarctica to envelopes that have been mailed from Pole Station and other stations on the continent over time. And some of them work for me and some of them don't. I can often tell just by looking at the style of the postal marking or the year, which is usually a keyword in the description. And so I'm currently sort of collecting these and going through this process of figuring out the way that people inhabit Antarctica now and the way that they have in the past and the way they communicate through letter mail, which is still really a primary means of communication. So much so that the American National Science Foundation, which operates Pole Station today, has a disclaimer on their website saying if you mail us something, it might take us a year to get back to you because we only have a limited time to work on the mail. So it's still, because of the limitations of internet in that space, a place that requires post in a different or special way than we do outside of that space. And so, because we were sort of thinking about eBay and other platforms that might be a more unlikely space to locate images or do research, we wanted to discuss an artwork that someone else has made, and we'll actually go through a couple of artworks by different artists that use the internet, searching, and digital tools to produce work in a way that we kind of feel a kinship with. And so we'll start by looking at 2 works by Penelope Umberco. And this piece, let's see if I can get it to play, is, I have to click here, a very short and tiny looping video, which is called Arrhythmia, parentheses, All the Dishes on eBay, and it's from 2001. And this work is a compilation of all the images of dishes for sale on eBay on October 28th in 2001. And so we're really interested in the way that she's using the content of eBay and the listings generated by the people using it allow her to create a collection, and the sort of platform of eBay itself sets these limits and parameters for the work that she abides by. So if she created the work on any other day, it would have been slightly different based on what had been sold or what had been newly listed. And this is a kind of a tactic that she uses across her practice to generate collage and montage, which is sometimes digital, sometimes print, sometimes video-based. She does a lot of versions of her work, so she might have something like this that is sort of exists online, and then another version of the same thing that exists as digital prints, or something that kind of fits in a gallery space, more traditional gallery space. And she always seems to be doing this in a way that kind of pulls out what we maybe don't always name, but can recognize as tropes or typologies of these kind of haphazardly produced photographs that populate platforms such as eBay. She also uses Craigslist quite a bit. And
this is another work by her called Views from the Internet. It brings together views through windows on home improvement websites. These views tend to be idyllic, suburban, or country landscapes perpetuating fantasies of escape. She locates and downloads these images, isolating the view from the outside. One thing that we find relevant to both of our practices, both collaboratively and individually, which we'll get into later, is that she's collecting from the internet, but also subjectively deciding which views are more seductive and relying, as we have in the past, on both search engine algorithms and her own kind of intuitive logic when locating and selecting the images, for instance, and also displaying the images. Oh yeah, back to me. Another artist that we wanted to kind of highlight is Martine Sims. Her work investigates and this work specifically investigates the meaningfulness of searching. She's an American artist based in Los Angeles who works in publishing, video, and performance. This is a website that she created called Everything I've Ever Wanted to Know, which features a list of all of her Google searches from 2004 to 2007. And she's described the work by saying, the language of search was the focus instead of the content of my queries. And as we scrolled through the keys together, we found ourselves talking about the length of this list and the fact that it was the early 2000s, so it started in 2004, and how we used these search tools maybe differently or less, like it was a desktop computer, likely a desktop computer, and how today we feel like the list would be much longer,
So this site is still online. She's not adding to it anymore. It sort of ends in 2007. But we kind of looked through the keywords, and she searches everything from the names of galleries and bands to things like causes plus yeast plus infection, Beyonce lyrics, Page Nation, and Chantal Ackerman. So there's this kind of intimacy to looking through this list. You know, it's clearly she's doing her homework and just like hanging out online and also doing medical research. So we thought that this was a work that kind of attracted us in part because she really cleverly frames the search engine search as a device for knowledge seeking, which is also sort of the way that we feel about it. And Rhizome's Net Art Anthology describes this work, which is actually a really great archive of online work, and you can access the site through it. Describes the work as a diary of her voice and a biographical record of the artist's life, but an evocative study of her relationship with an increasingly powerful platform.
And we also wanted to highlight this particular work because part of this talk was that we wanted to talk about kind of the intimacy of browsing the internet. We found this an excellent example of the kind of intimacy that comes with even Google search engines. But today, like we said before, because of kind of increased usage of handheld devices and everything, we also feel like this list, if I made it today, for instance, would maybe be even more kind of exposing or vulnerable than it was from 2004 to 2007.
So the next project that we want to jump to is called Image Atlas, which is also a web work. And it was created by photographer Taryn Simon and computer programmer Aaron Schwartz in 2012. And this work investigates cultural differences and similarities by indexing the top image results for given search terms across local search engines throughout the world. And visitors to the site can observe the variations across these search results for the same keyword across 57 different countries that they've made available. And you can refine and sort the results by either alphabetical order or gross domestic product. So you can sort of regroup the lines of images based on these different parameters. And world, for example, is an instance where things are pretty similar, but we also found that when we searched window, for example, that there were big variations in the results across different countries. Maybe not today. That's last time.
Yeah.
We were sort of getting this funny mix of like physical windows in houses,
Oh,
and
I know what the difference is. If we do this, and we capitalize this.
oh yes, windows. You get a mix of physical windows and then like Windows software. So based on the location, the algorithm of that search engine is prioritizing one thing over another, which we think is something that's really important to point out and is very well illustrated in this work.
And the work came about, this is Terrence Hyman and Aaron Schwartz. They were paired together by Rhizome's 7/7 conference that matched 7 leading artists with 7 technologists and asked them to collaborate and make something new in a short amount of time. Terrence Hyman, her art practice is research-based and often works to unfold a puzzle or a story. She tends to delve into great detail to explore one image fact or phenomenon. And Aaron Schwartz was a prominent advocate for open source platforms, open internet, and the freedom of information. We wanted to show this project as an example of an artwork that interrogates the act of searching, considering what people look for, what is available to be looked for, and for who, and the politics of algorithms and search tools. And people might know of Aaron Schwartz through this work. They also may know of him because of sort of a scandal that happened near the end of his life. So he's relatively well known for being indicted by the American government for downloading several million articles from JSTOR, which is probably familiar to the academics in the room. It's a subscription-based digital library, which often universities subscribe to, and it has a paywall. So if you're, say, a member of the university, you can use your library login password to access it, but otherwise you have to pay quite a lot to view one individual article. And so he downloaded these through the computer network at MIT where he was working, which didn't require him to hack into it. He just had the capacity to do it, but it sort of triggered alarms within the MIT system and within JSTOR system saying, like this is against our code of conduct. And so the United States government, sort of with the help of MIT, ended up generating a lawsuit, which unfortunately, during which he ended up committing suicide, which is quite sad. He was sort of a very young and prominent leftist internet thinker and maker. So it was kind of a moment of great loss for all of us, I think. And so we wanted to bring up this work and Schwartz himself as an example, as this kind of symbolic figure within the debate of access to information on the internet, and sort of think through the question of who has the right to access and share on the internet, and what can they access and share. From there, we wanted to move into a work by Ravi Maru called The Pixelated Revolution, which was originally performed and exhibited at Documented 12. It is a performance lecture that analyzes a video shot in Syria in 2011 that was uploaded onto YouTube. Maru undertakes this work as a video analysis of evidence. And he describes this video as one video in a series of videos found on YouTube for people that are shooting for their lives or double shooting. He's making visible people who are risking their lives in order to disseminate knowledge, specifically in Syria in 2011. As the piece progresses, Rue attempts to zoom in on the camera shooter's face, and we realize that the image is kind of completely pixelated and obscured. although it was potentially intended to act as evidence and does to a certain degree, the pixelation of the image renders the individual unrecognizable. I'm going to play a short clip from this. It is online and on here and
The duration of the video is 1 minute and 23 seconds. The shot is taken from one of the upper floors of the building in a residential neighborhood. It's clear that the Syrian cameraman is filming from the window or balcony of an apartment. He is standing inside the apartment, holding his mobile phone in his hand and filming what's happening outside. The film starts with the sound of a gun being shot, followed by a series of images of rooftops, balconies, walls, windows, and different buildings. The unseen cameraman makes a fast-paced introduction.
الأمل يضرب على الإخوة المواطنين بتحري طريق الشام كامل الشام 1/7/2012 بدون أي سبب، لا تظاهر ولا أي شيء.
I'm going to stop it here. This is another shot from the video.
Yeah. So in this still that we're showing that comes later in the video, he's breaking out individual frames from the cell phone video and showing the way that it kind of, the camera is moving and images are abstracted, and we see both like sort of landscapes and sort of close-ups of cement and buildings. And in showing this piece and thinking through it ourselves, we were continuing to think of image as evidence. And in this case, particularly, we were thinking about who has the right to share imagery and footage online and for what purposes. And this artwork accesses sort of a darker side of the content of the internet, which is potentially unavailable on sort of mainstream and television media at times, but yet it's of vital importance, and addresses the circulation of images and the creation of counter-narratives online in times of political crisis. And when we watch this work, we sort of find ourselves thinking through this question of what is visible, what do we see, and how do we hide? And that can be in terms of making an image or being in an image, or being in sort of political crisis.
And so we wanted to move from that work to Hito Styles' work, How Not to Be Seen. The video is divided into 5 lessons on visibility in the digital age. This clip that we're going to show is from the first section entitled Make Something Invisible for a Camera. In this work and across the practice, Styles is asking viewers to question, how do people disappear in the age of total over-invisibility? Are people hidden by too many images, and do they become images? I just realized I ruined your part.
We swapped.
Okay.
And so now I think we'll play a clip to give you sort of a taste of the work. There we go. We queued it up to a certain moment, 1 minute in.
This is a resolution target. It measures the resolution of the world as a picture. Resolution determines visibility. Whatever is not captured by resolution is invisible.
Her work often references the ties between the art world and the military-industrial complex. And one example that I find useful in navigating her work and her kind of thesis of disappearing in the digital age is her example, her reference to the evolution of camouflage. where she speaks about how it was initially designed to disguise soldiers on the ground, and now the most commonly used camouflage in the army is now made of pixels to hide men from an aerial view from being detected for aerial surveillance. Circle back to you, Dave, a little bit.
I think the keywords that are sort of the titles of the objects for sale are kind of interesting and revealing. U.S. Army woodland camouflage, and then Army pixel camo winter. Sort of create a context and a time for these objects. And I think the aesthetic of this video, which we recommend you watch all the way through, it's online, I think on the Art Forum website. If you Google it, you'll find it. And so sort of the aesthetics of this work and many of her works are really colorful and punchy. They kind of look like the internet, which I think is something that's interesting and important to her in making the work. And How Not to Be Seen sort of progresses the ways that people can become invisible, and some of them are kind of grim. And for example, becoming an enemy of the state is one of the sort of moments of invisibility that she uses when she talks about people disappearing. And she uses kind of tactics of humor where, she does cut to someone disappearing, kind of a bad video editing tactic to talk about a really kind of serious and sad political issue in certain geographies. And the video in particular is referencing the disappearance of a friend who went missing in 1998 in Turkey, and they were a member of a Kurdish rebel organization. So.
So we would like to show one last video by Sackville.
So the video is kind of it's a 28-second kind of one-liner joke, but we think it represents this way that she's thinking through different realms of politics. In this case, the politics of art making and what is contemporary art and what is digital practice and how are artists generally represented. And we thought this was a nice example because it sort of loops back to our thoughts at the beginning of the presentation. And the work we've referenced by Sophie Lehman. And we thought that this work was sort of a nice place to end the talk because of this looping back, and because it's an example of the convergence of virtual and physical spaces, which Sophie Lehman suggests work to create new spaces in contemporary art making.
We also have a workshop this afternoon, and we developed for Owens Online online work that recycles some of the images we've used, but not all of them kind of references different things. And we once again really would like to thank you for all of the tech support and just general support for that project as well.
Rachel's been a superhero.
Yeah, patient with us in our time.
And so we're using the internet and scrolling in that work to kind of create this online collage, which has still images and video and overlapping images and kind of live streams and all of these things. And we will use that work as the main example of sort of how to generate collage online for discussion in our workshop that starts at 1. Okay, thank you.
For asking. Generally speaking, my work kind of when I search for images and also kind of the end product is video based. So a lot of it, for instance, if I go up to kind of a lot of them are screenshots from YouTube videos, and because I'm looking for a particular moment, I'm like Googling like Plattenbau, Plattenbau in pop culture, like what uses the Plattenbau, and I'm accessing various lists that may or may not talk about the Plattenbau. I can also look up East Germany in a certain amount of time, kind of try and find them, often like scrolling through an entire movie to try and find that like one image, and also kind of because of the residency in the beginning of that project, people would come in and mention, oh yeah, and this, and this, and this, and that was of course helpful for me as somebody who was in Germany, I think for 3 or 4 years at that time, but don't necessarily have all of the cultural references that somebody from East Germany might have. So also kind of, just really collecting information from others and then like writing it down and then referencing that and these kinds of things. And then on top of that, with kind of like more of the news articles and stuff, one thing that I meant to mention is that at this time the Plattenbau was kind of experiencing some kind of revival. Like there was a lot of articles being like, the Plattenbau is like wieder cool again, which is like Plattenbau is cool again, like this kind of thing. Like so like wieder cool, not wieder cool again, but they didn't put again in there. But this kind of thing. So so also kind of searching for that online and going from one thing to the next. And then the fashion ones, you could do, I think I also did, which will come up in the workshop this afternoon, kind of image matching. So you can like drag in an image and then it might show you like images that are similar, and with such an iconic type of building, you might get things that way. It's definitely a huge rabbit hole and one that I enjoy, but it definitely, and then it's also like some things are easy and they come and you get the best image, and then some things it's like you spend 3 hours just like squinting looking for like that one image of like and it's like, so that way basically.
It kind of ebbs and flows. Like in that project particularly, I go through phases where I like am checking eBay every day or like multiple times a day, and it's really on my mind. And then there are other weeks where I'm really busy and I maybe kind of forget to check it. And I think that kind of mirrors the type of chance of actually just using eBay to locate anything. So if I don't look at the exact right moment, something might be being purchased by someone else and I'll miss it. So I think a big part of that project for me is this kind of the chance of finding something, and this kind of lack of control I have over what will come up and when and how often. And like I mentioned last week, I found 2 in one sitting very quickly. Other times I might have to scroll through 400 results and find nothing. But I sort of set up these parameters for myself that if I'm searching, I look at all the results, and I kind of have a set of, I think like 3 or 4, keyword groupings that let me find the envelopes. So Pole Station Antarctica is one. You might have noticed that the postal marking actually also says Operation Deep Freeze, which is like a code name for the Navy expedition that actually built Pole Station at the South Pole in Antarctica. So it's like this kind of funny reference point, but because there are military ephemera collectors who are interested in it for being part of this sort of operation and building project in Antarctica, I can use that as a search key. So it's sort of, it's like as systematic as I can make it in a way, but then sort of having to give in to the chance and potentially dedicating a lot of time to find nothing or something small.
Yeah, I think, also with this project, I call it an archive, but it's also, of course, like, I refer to it as like a scrappy archive. It's not really, there's, I think, no way for me to really make it complete, and then entire things happen, like the whole Gucci kind of fashion shoot, whatever, and then you've got like this whole new kind of mountain of images to deal with, and so it's like there's, I think, also,
The impossibility of collections being complete, I
Yeah.
think is like a nice way that you talk about that work, and I think it's also a way that I frame the whole station work.
Yeah.
Like trying desperately to find everything you can, knowing that you can't find it all.
Yeah. If for the Gucci shots, for instance, if I had integrated them into that video, I probably would have done a different screenshot than the original shot, maybe even a very specific part of it, and integrated it for like 5 seconds or less or something like that. So kind of, but it is a constant question, and those things change, and kind of we have talked about that like many times, kind of like,
What's fair dealing?
Yeah, but it is something like that I kind of have to loop back to and be like, okay, is this okay? Is this okay? You know, and yeah.
I think we're both coming up with that, like up against that constantly, and sort of hoping that in generating an artwork and sort of almost in a lot of ways like re-photographing something or bringing it into new context, people would be sort of okay, and I don't think either of us have had any sort of like cease and desist yet.
Yeah, there's like a photographing the photograph with things like screenshots and kind of, you know, that kind of thing. But yeah, I mean, I
if you include the
definitely-
browser in the image, then it's not exactly Gucci, it's your, you know, like that kind of thing.
But definitely I think, especially with this project and the things that we've been doing together, but also I think individually, like anytime that I'm like, I wonder, I just like look it up and try and figure out, you know, be like, I wonder if this, yeah.
Yeah, so I've sort of, the answer to the first part of your question is I have found one single object in any of the sort of 92 envelopes, which was sort of like a paste-up record. And then the rest are either empty or just have like a cue card in them to hold them firm, which is like something that postal collectors do to sort of like stop the envelope from getting bent or torn. So another thing that's interesting for me in that work is that envelopes in the sort of like nerdy, mostly old man ephemera collecting, stamp collecting world are referred to as covers because they cover the contents. And so I kind of think of them as these like fascinating, information heavy like blankets. They're sort of like round letters. And I'm kind of interested in the way that they are empty and they're being kept for these sort of like time stamps and markers that are kind of these, I think, poetic illustrations of, you know, an object moving from one space to another. And in terms of knowing how many people were there, I haven't found a firm list yet, although I know it exists because the American military, of course, like all militaries, keeps records. It's not something that's been written about a ton. But I have found reference saying that it was one of the larger batch of mails to go out from Antarctica in that time period from roughly like 55 to 57, where the station was being built and then used for its initial sort of international research project on geophysical phenomena in Antarctica. So I know that it's sort of lots of envelopes, and for example, in the collection I'll have, you know, 3 letters from the same person to the same person that clearly have like gone to the post office, but because there's not really like a postmaster, it's just whoever has time to volunteer to sort of stamp the envelopes. You know, they've sort of been piling up. And so I think the fact that I found, you know, almost 100 means that there's many. And I'm just like, I've been looking since 2012 and I keep finding them and I'm shocked every time. Like I always think there can't be any more. But I do hope to find that number one day. Yeah, I think I kind of end up in this work and others diving into this kind of funny world of like stamp collecting. And I've been thinking about, I mean, for example, like if I go, there are annual stamp shows at different towns in Ontario that I can access. And when I go, I stand out like a sore thumb. Like I'm much younger than almost all the people there, because I think collecting stamps is kind of a dying and dwindling hobby. And so I kind of, sometimes in those moments have like difficulty relating, but then, you know, in other ways, I'm kind of fascinated by the fact that someone puts so much time and effort into like amassing these pieces of paper that often have nothing to do with them. And I think there's something really interesting about the way that an envelope or a stamp kind of traces a path. Like it sort of evidences this particular moment in time and movement from like one place to another and between the hands of sort of two people. And I can't say for sure exactly why stamp collectors are always interested. Often it's based on a topic, like, you know, the US Navy or a certain city, or, you know, like the image on a certain, you know, type of stamp. But for me, I'm really interested in like the strangeness of like anyone being interested in these things, and the way that I think they can be kind of poetic. And I think the way they become even more poetic in the moment that they sort of start changing hands outside of their initial purpose. Yeah, and I think, you know, there's something important for me in the work, in this idea that they've gone from Antarctica to someone specific, somewhere specific, and then potentially any number of other places to other collectors. And then to me, so I'm sort of like re-engaging them, and I'm often buying them on eBay and being mailed an envelope that's just tucked in another envelope. So yeah, I think it is funny, and that's sort of part of the appeal.